What's up, everybody? So, coming out of First Take, the conversation really zeroed in on some restricted free agent situations worth monitoring. Guys like Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, and Quentin Grimes. And I've got to tell you, the way it was broken down, the Lakers should at least be keeping tabs on the Grimes situation. Now, whether they already have or not, that's behind the scene. But the logic is simple. He's young enough to fit the team's current foundation and still grow into a bigger role for the future. The discussion compared him to the Malik Monk scenario, where you sign a guy on a prove-it deal, give him the platform in Los Angeles, let him bet on himself, and watch it pay off. Tim Bontemps pointed out that Grimes entered the offseason looking for something in the $20–30 million per year range, but so far, that market just hasn't materialized. And here's the catch. He's a restricted free agent. That means if a team like the Lakers wanted to throw a big offer at him early in free agency, their cap space would be tied up until Philly made a decision. That kind of waiting can kill your off-season flexibility, especially when other targets are on the board. So the reality is, most teams are hanging back to see if the Sixers and Grimes can't come to an agreement. If that happens, it opens the door for someone to swoop in later. And one factor potentially slowing all of this down? Uncertainty in Philadelphia, specifically around Joel Embiid and Paul George. There are whispers about Embiid's knees being in bad shape, and Paul George's health has been up and down as well. If Grimes ends up taking the qualifying offer, which would be just under $8 million, Philly could start the season only a few million over the luxury tax. And if the year goes south, they'd have the flexibility to duck under the tax line by moving him mid-season. That's where the Lakers' angle comes in. If Philly's open to it, why not see if you can work out a trade now instead of waiting? Maybe you take on his salary. Maybe you send back a small asset or move some money off their books. If you can get him for around $10 million a year, that's a value play, especially for a 25-year-old who's coming off the best stretch of his career. Just turned 25 in May, put up 15 points, 4 boards, 3 assists on 47% shooting last season, and did it while showing real two-way upside. Sure, it's a bit of a gamble, but this is exactly the kind of move a front office makes if they want to get younger without sacrificing competitiveness. And here's the thing they really emphasized on First Take. You can't just look at Grimes' numbers last year without looking at the context. The surge in his production wasn't random. It was directly tied to him landing in Philadelphia. That was a team decimated by injury, one of the worst records in the league, and frankly, just desperate for scoring. That created a perfect storm. More minutes, more touches, and way more shot attempts. And he capitalized. No one's taking that away from him. But if you rewind to his time in Dallas, the numbers tell a different story. He averaged 10.2 points on 7.8 shots per game. Then, in Philly, almost doubled his output, 21.9 points on 16.4 attempts. That's a massive jump, and it forces you to ask, how much of that was Grimes leveling up, and how much of it was simply the environment? From the Lakers' perspective, though, that might not even matter. He's a classic, low-risk, high-reward pickup. His price tag won't break the bank, and if it clicks, you suddenly have an insurance policy for Austin Reeves. They're close in age, both capable of creating their own shot, and in a worst-case scenario, Grimes is your 6th man, giving you much-needed offense off a bench that, last season, ranked near the bottom of the league in scoring efficiency. There's also the possibility, and this was brought up in the discussion, that Grimes accepts the qualifying offer but pushes for a trade, maybe even specifying the Lakers as his preferred landing spot. If the rumors are true that Philly is willing to sign him with the intent to eventually move him, it makes all the sense in the world to start those talks now. That could mean a straight salary absorption, it could mean a smaller trade package, or even a multiplayer deal where you snag another piece, someone like Kelly Oubre, while sending back depth or draft considerations, and you wouldn't have to part with a first-round pick. In a scenario like this, you're not prying away a franchise cornerstone, you're essentially helping Philly with their cap sheet. That's usually a second-rounder or a swap at most, just to formalize the transaction. The caveat? Well, here's where the real intrigue sets in. Because while we know Quentin Grimes can fill up the stat sheet, when the ball is in his hands and the offense runs through him, we don't yet know how that translates in a true winning environment. In Philadelphia, he had what most players dream of, the ultimate green light. 17 shots a night if he wanted them, the freedom to create, and a team situation where the roster's injuries essentially forced him into a starring role. That's the kind of opportunity that inflates numbers, builds confidence, but doesn't necessarily answer the question of how a player adapts when those touches are cut in half. On the Lakers, that scenario simply doesn't exist. Playing next to stars like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and potentially even Luka Doncic, if that dream reunion ever materializes, means the pecking order is set. You're not walking in as the first or even second option. You're fitting into a system where efficiency matters more than volume, and where your contributions might come in short bursts, rather than extended stretches of ball dominance. So the real question becomes, can Grimes still give you a steady 14 to 15 points per night while taking fewer shots? Can he maintain that shooting efficiency when his rhythm depends on spot-up opportunities and quick reads instead of a constant diet of isolation plays? Then there's the other side of the floor, the defensive end. This is where the conversation gets even more interesting. Grimes has shown flashes of being disruptive on the perimeter, using his length and quickness to bother shooters and chase guards over screen. But flashes don't win playoff games, consistency does. And while the athleticism is clearly there, the leap from capable defender to reliable defender is all about habits, film work, and discipline. The Lakers' system, with its emphasis on rotations, help coverage, and switching versatility, could be the perfect environment to unlock that side of his game. If that switch flips, if the potential becomes performance, Grimes could realistically surpass someone like Austin Reeves in terms of defensive impact on the perimeter. That's not a knock on Reeves. It's simply an acknowledgement of Grimes' physical tools and what he could become with the right guidance. But until we see it, it's still a question mark. The upside is there, no doubt. Now it's about whether he's ready to embrace a role where the spotlight is smaller, the margins are thinner, and every possession matters. The upside is undeniable. If it works, you've got a player who can slot next to your stars for years to come. And if he embraces that sixth-man role in LA, his visibility skyrockets. Win a title, play a key role, and suddenly that $20–30 million contract he's chasing looks a lot more realistic. And that's exactly the kind of mutual incentive that could make this pairing work. A player betting on himself, and a contender giving him the platform to cash in on that bet. And here's where it gets interesting. Because if you're Quentin Grimes, and you're looking at the bigger picture, this is exactly the kind of situation where a little bit of player initiative can change everything. All it might take is a subtle push, a quiet conversation, and suddenly, you've got a pathway to LA. Think about it. He's already proven that he can be a reliable three-point shooter in different systems. In Dallas, he hit 40% from deep on 4, 3 attempts per game. That's not just good, that's elite efficiency. In Philadelphia, even with a heavier workload and more defensive attention, he still managed 37.3% on 8 attempts per game. That kind of consistency from behind the arc doesn't just translate, it traveled. And in a Lakers offense that thrives on spacing around its stars, that's gold. Now sure, there are defensive question marks. He's not locking down all NBA wings right now, but his athletic profile suggests he can improve with the right coaching and a role that prioritizes defensive discipline. Playing in a competitive, championship-focused environment often sharpens that side of a player's game, especially when they're surrounded by veterans who demand accountability on that end of the floor. And here's the thing, nothing in the rules stops Luka from picking up the phone and saying, "Hey buddy, remember how much fun we had in Dallas? Why not make it happen again in LA?" That's not tampering in the league's eyes if it's just player-to-player conversation. A little friendly encouragement could go a long way toward Grimes making his intentions known. The reality with restricted free agents is this. A lot of them may take the qualifying offer, gamble on themselves for one more year, and then test the market as unrestricted free agents. That path gives them control, but it also opens the door for trade scenarios if their current team doesn't want to risk losing them for nothing. And in cases like this, where the clock is ticking toward training camp, the pressure only builds. If the Sixers get the sense they can't keep him long-term, putting him on the trade block before camp makes perfect sense. And if the Lakers are in the mix, they'd have to weigh the cost, which, as we said earlier, probably isn't a first-round pick. It's more likely to be a smaller package, maybe a second-rounder or a pick swap, designed to get the deal done without overpaying. Bottom line, don't be surprised if, as September approaches, you start hearing Grimes' name in trade chatter. The skill set is too valuable, the market dynamics too fluid, and the Lakers' need for bench scoring too real for this to just fade away. And if it does happen, and he lands in LA, we could be looking back in a few months and calling it one of the smartest under-the-radar moves of the offseason.